Right, so having spent quite a long time lying on my back under here dealing with rust, I'm finally now getting to the part that I've been putting off and procrastinating about, which is the rear arches. I had quite good success with the rear battery box, which you may have seen in a previous video, so I'm feeling fairly confident I can do it, but there was no way I was going to be able to make the shape myself out of sheet metal. So I've gone ahead and bought myself some rear replacement arches, which I'll be able to cut parts out of and use. They're just on eBay. I'll put a link to those in the description. So the first things first, I need to get things out of the way. So I'm going to remove the rear bumper and probably this side strip, and then I can see what I'm really dealing with. And after that, I guess it's a case of getting the angle grinder out, cutting the rot out, making patches with this, welding it all up. Let's see how it goes. Right, starting with the rear bumper, I believe it's just these two Torx screws up there. Let's see if this comes off. It should just slide off one side and screw those. Typically, it was a T55. I had a 50 and a 60, but the 50 with the old foil trick seems to have worked a treat. Go. These are a 10 and they look pretty rusty, unfortunately. Let's hope they come out. There's always one. And with those removed, it's time to crack on. The passenger side arch actually doesn't look too bad. There's a little bit of rust going on at the bottom corners of both sides, but the main problem on this side really is the inner arch. There's a few rust holes in there, so I'm going to need to sort that out. I have a replacement panel for the inner arch too. I think I'm going to start on this side, which is the driver's side, because the most obvious rust is here, which really needs attention. And of course the inner arch on that area is bad too. The rest of this one not too bad though. Fits up reasonably well, I think. As you can see, I marked on in marker pen where the limits are of the patch panel I've bought, just so I can make sure I don't do anything really stupid and chop more out than I have to replace. As you can see, there's quite a bit of rust still there to cut out from the inner arch, which I need to remove and replace that too. I've also got to cut quite a bit more of this side skirt area because I'm revealing some rust in that gap there, which looks pretty bad, to be honest. But I already knew this was rusty. As you can see, the jacking point is pretty bad too. So let's see how far that goes. But of course, my patch goes up to here, so I'm not going to go too much further. At the top, I think we've hit solid metal there, so I think that's a reasonable point to stop at. Right, let's cut some more of this inner arch out and see what more we find. Right, with more of that inner skin cut away, I think I'm finding a bit of a problem here. Peering into the hole I've cut here, I can see there's actually quite bad rot within the bottom of this sill, and it goes all the way up to just beyond the jacking point really. To be honest, the jacking point is pretty sketchy. So what I've done to be able to address this and cut it out, I've had to move the axle stand a bit further up, just to give me a bit more room to work over here. I've also put an extra one in and firmed it up just for support, and bear in mind there's no rear beam on rear wheels or diff or anything like that, so the back end's as light as it can be, so I don't expect this to cave in. I think it's pretty solid, to be honest, and now of course I've got room to cut this out and work in there. Right, so that's all the rot cut out and all of the edges cleaned up. So now I need to think about where to start really. There's multiple skins here, 1, 2, 3, and this obviously is a separate piece. I haven't got a repair kit for this of any description, so I'm just going to try and make stuff up out of sheet metal that I have. I think I'm going to start with the inner skin, then do the box middle skin, and then worry about the outer area. This is the shape I need to cut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a generous piece of this sheet metal, and then I'll start working on the specific shape. But playing with this large piece is a pain in the ass, so I'll cut myself a smaller one. So I've got my patch welded in here. Ended up cutting it into 3 parts because I was having a hard time with the shaping of it as one. It was actually quite a fiddle, but got there in the end. I've ground down the welds a bit. It's nice and smooth here, which is going to be visible, well, when the wheel's off. And here I've just took the tops off. I'm going to leave it as it is because it's quite well hidden. So the next thing to do is to cut along this line to match up with this seam, with the sill seam there. And then it should all be the right height, and then I can move on to the inner skin here for this chassis rail style thing within the sill. But so far so good. So I've sprayed a bit of weld through primer over it just to stop it from flash rusting. Now I'm moving on to this inner skin. So this is like a pressed piece of steel, and as you can see it's got like a corrugated shape to it. I'm never going to be able to bend a patch to meet up with that perfectly, not in a month of Sundays, so I'm not even going to try. So what I've done is I'm doing a bit of cardboard aided design, and I'm going to slip this in behind there so I can weld it to it at certain points, and then figure out how I'm going to extend these or fill these gaps afterwards. But that should be very sturdy if I can get metal welded in like that. This here is actually the support, the inner support for the rear jacking point. So I definitely want to make sure this is solid as a rock. Try again. Not quite done. Oh, don't look at it. Right, so I've welded in the jacking support, so it's pretty much a semicircle of metal. I've extended that down and I've left it a bit long so I can cut it down before I put the outer skin on. That way it can contact and give the jacking point the support it's supposed to have from factory. Very solid, I'm quite happy with it. So the next thing to do is to get a bit of primer on this just to make sure it doesn't rust from the inside out. And then I'm going to turn my attention to the arch. Once I've got the arch on, I'll be left with a window here, and then I'll worry about patching that window in afterwards. But let's move on to the arch now. So although I've got a full rear arch repair panel, I'm actually only looking at doing the front at the moment. The rest seems quite solid. So the first things first, I'm going to cut this repair panel down so that I'm not dealing with this unwieldy panel, and that way I can just focus on the area I'm working on. The method I think I'm going to use, and I've seen this method on YouTube before, and other people have used it very successfully, is I'm going to match up my repair panel with the existing bodywork on the car and get it held on firmly, and then I'm going to cut through both the patch skin and the car skin with an angle grinder, something like that, and that way I'm going to end up with a patch that's a perfect fit for the hole I'll have then cut in the car's bodywork. I've never done anything like this before, so it's a bit worrying, but in theory it should work perfectly. Right, let's cut this patch down.
Just glue it on, it'll be right.
Looks like that. Right, now for the moment of truth. Need to finish it off a little bit in a couple of areas, but I think it's going to work just fine. Yep, I think I should be able to work with that. Not bad at all. Right, so you saw I got my patch panel cut, and that was actually very successful, so I'm really pleased about that. The next thing I'm going to do is something I've seen some professional garages do online, of course, and that's welding a little support panel behind. I've just used another bit of the patch that I didn't use, which is obviously a perfect fit. So I'm going to get this welded in here. And what that's going to enable me to do is have an easier time lining this new patch up, but also make life much easier when I'm welding this new patch on, because it'll prevent me from blowing through as easily, because obviously this is very thin sheet metal. So I'm going to get that welded in there, probably put another 1 or 2 on here, and then I can move on to fitting this on and getting it permanently welded back into place. Right, so I've got my support pieces all welded in around the hole now, and this sits on them really quite nicely. Quite pleased with that. So the next thing to do now is the scary bit, which is welding all the way around this to get it as hopefully as seamless as possible. So the way I'm going to go about this is I'm going to really take my time. I'm just going to do tack welds here and there until I've welded the whole thing and there's no more gaps. From reading and from what advice other people have given me, I really need to take my time with this, because if I put too much heat into the panel it could warp, and then I'll end up in a really frustrating situation where I've gone to a lot of effort and it looks like crap. I've got to be patient. Right, let's get the welder revved up. So that's the first round of welding done, and it's in really solidly. I'm reasonably pleased with how that's gone. It took bloody ages because I was being very cautious, giving it plenty of time to cool down. So the next thing to do is to flat disc all the welds, which will reveal any gaps that I may have missed, and then I can do a second pass of welding. So far so good. Right, so that's the rear arch outer skin welded in, and it's absolutely bloody solid. I'm quite pleased with how that's gone, to be honest, although it's taken many hours more than I anticipated. I mean, it's not perfect, but once there's a skim of filler over it and it's all blended in nicely, ready for paint, I suspect you won't really be able to tell that that's actually a replacement piece at all, which is exactly what I was aiming for. As you saw, I just sprayed a bit of a quick coat of primer on it just to prevent it from flash rusting. And I think for now I'm going to leave it like that and come back to do any further tidying up later on. But what I really need to do is turn my attention to this jacking point area. You'll have seen me boxing that up earlier in the video, but I think I'm going to stop for today and come back to this in a separate video. It goes without saying that I also need to do the inner arch on this side, which is currently a gaping hole, but I'll probably do that in a separate video after this jacking point repair. I'm breaking this into chunks just to make sure people can easily find these videos, and they might be helpful if they have the same problem. If you've enjoyed watching me struggle with this, why not subscribe and watch me struggle with the next parts too. But anyway, thanks for watching, and why not smash the like button if you're that way out. Cheers.